Hi, I'm Helen Bauer, and this is the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Heart of Hospice podcast is your source for compassionate and informative discussions about hospice and end-of-life care. I'm a certified hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience. Whether you're a caregiver, someone with a serious illness, or you simply need to know more about hospice care, this podcast is for you. Join me as we explore all the aspects of hospice, from the details of caregiving to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of end-of-life journeys. For more resources and to connect with me, visit theheartofhospice.com and find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Keep listening for today's episode.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This episode is being sponsored by Halo Care. Whether you're supporting an aging parent or planning for your own independence, Halo Care empowers you to live confidently at home. From personal care and home safety to meaningful social connection, Halo Care gives you peace of mind knowing someone's always there. Learn more at halocaregroup.com/USA or check the show notes for the link. Halo Care, where technology meets compassion and home feels like home. This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services. When you need information about hospice, Hospice Navigation Services is here to help. An expert navigator will answer your questions about end-of-life care and give you the tools to feel confident in your decisions. A hospice navigation session is a great way to troubleshoot your current hospice care. It's your journey. We can be your guide. Visit hospicenavigation.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today.
Today's guest found joy in her caregiving experience walking alongside her mother in the last months of her life. Today's guest, Alexandra Grabbe, built a career as an author and a journalist, raising her family overseas before becoming a hands-on caregiver for her mom, Beatrice. Through her caregiving experience, Alexandra came to know her mom on a much deeper level, and she found joy in accompanying her mom during Beatrice's last days. Alexandra's memoir, Seeing Joy, A Story of Life, Death, and What Comes Next, is a deeply personal memoir that reveals how caregiving, memory, and mystery intertwine in a daughter's final days with her fierce, unforgettable mother. My guest, Alexandra, begins by describing her mom's life, her education, her adventures. She was very well educated, receiving a degree from Vassar College. In her later years, after spending time in the hospital, Beatrice was sent to a rehab facility, but then the decision was made for her to be cared for at home by Alexandra, along with care from a hospice team. Alexandra's experience as her mom's caregiver changed the dynamic of their relationship. The whole caregiving experience was complicated. She was a solo caregiver. It was complicated by the fact that she was also working full-time as a bed and breakfast owner, which is really a 24/7 job. Alexandra's mom experienced deathbed visioning, seeing people in the room, and Alexandra began calling them her mom's invisible people. Her mom was on hospice for about 7 months, and Alexandra describes it as a really positive experience. Be sure to listen to the advice she offers to caregivers if you're feeling hesitant about utilizing hospice services. This is a great story. You're going to love the heart of Beatrice. She's a mess. She's funny. She's fierce. And Alexandra shares her stories with so much compassion. So there's a lot to learn from her story. Be sure to listen to the whole episode. Alexandra, it's so great to have you on the show. Welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Helen. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm excited to hear you tell your story because I kind of like your mom, just from what you've told me about her and what I've read about her. She sounds like she was a force. And I kind of like strong women, so I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Well, she was definitely a force. She, towards the end of her life, she used to wear this little hat, and it had a big B on it because her name was Beatrice, a bee in rhinestones. So that sort of gives you an idea of, what she looked like when she went to her seminars at the library. She insisted on going to seminars, especially there was one on Shakespeare. And she was very sociable. She met people at these seminars, and that really, she was in her 90s, but she was just delighted by that. But at heart, she was like a New Jersey girl. She, never totally got out of New Jersey. She'd always, when we'd go, I used to live in Washington, D.C., and when we would take the New Jersey Turnpike someplace, she'd say, "Oh, this is where I am from, Montclair." She got really excited. But she was determined from the very beginning, and she went to Montclair High School, and she felt that wasn't enough, so she signed up somehow for a half year in a private school that was called Kent Place, and that helped her to get into Vassar. So she went to Vassar, which was a totally different world for her because she met a lot of privileged women there. And then after Vassar, she worked in Manhattan. She lived in Manhattan. She loved Manhattan. And she had a job at Time Life producing radio shows.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then she lost that job because of, a Me Too moment. And when I was growing up in Washington, D.C., she worked for MCA, which stands for Manufacturing Chemists Association, doing PR for them. And after that, she edited the American Studies newsletter for the Fulbright Scholars Foundation. But that was, before she retired. Then when she retired, she and my father moved to Cape Cod because she had very fond memories of when I was a child on Cape Cod. She had a friend whose husband was a famous author, and they had a house on a pond. And so they were always there in the summer, and my mom wanted to be in the same place as this former Vassar roommate. So they bought a house on Cape Cod. And then she, you were curious as to what she did towards the end of her life. She used to write letters for Amnesty International. And she read the New York Times daily, as well as the New York Review of Books. So she was quite a character.
I love it. So she was a little bit of a fighter. She was a Jersey girl, lived in New York, and then she was very well educated at Vassar.
Exactly.
Yeah. I love women like that. She was the whole thing, the whole package.
She was, one of the first career women, really, I think, of America. I mean, I don't know exactly what the statistics are, but she was definitely a professional woman. And when I was growing up, that was really hard for me because, when all my friends had moms who were home baking cookies, and my mom didn't get home until dinner time, and then it was sort of rushed. And, so that was very hard, I found.
Yeah. Everybody else's mom was June Cleaver.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. So you were your mother's caregiver in her later years, after she became ill, and you became very close and very involved in her care. Tell me a little bit more about your caregiving experience before we talk about what it was like for you. Tell me about the kind of care that you were providing for your mom.
When I decided to move back, because I was living in Europe, and when I decided to move back and take care of her, my father was still alive. He was 7 years older than she was, so that would have been, let's see. So we moved back in 97, So he passed away in 99, but my mom was younger, so she was still, going fine, doing fine. And so I thought I was going to be able to take care of them, but I had no idea what I was getting into. I really didn't. I was a novice, totally.
Yeah.
I had taken care of my children, but that's very different, when you have little children. We were fortunate because at the end of my mother's life, she had she had bursitis of the knee, and that sent her to the hospital. And she was in the hospital for, I think, 3-4 days, and then they told me that they were going to send her to a rehab facility. So she was in the rehab facility for 3 weeks, but she somehow decided she didn't want rehab, and so they told me, well, now we have a branch of our facility that is a nursing home. Would you like us to put her in the nursing home? And I said, no, we're going to take care of her. We're taking her home. She wants to be home. And so that's what we did. But we sort of thought that, this was going to, I don't want to say easy, but I guess
Easier.
easier. We had no idea, or I had no idea what I was really getting into, because home care is very demanding, and it's strenuous, and you lose sleep. But we were fortunate because her doctor called in hospice, and I didn't know that you have to have a doctor request hospice. The doctor suggested it himself. And I became a big fan of hospice because the women who came and helped me were just so amazing. It was really fabulous.
Well, you made the decision that so many caregivers make. We want to keep mom or dad with us. We want to keep our person at home. And so we'll just take care of them at home. And it's a simple decision to make, but in execution, it's a whole lot harder and way more complex than people really understand before they get into it. And then all of a sudden you realize you're neck deep in all of this stuff, all the caregiving responsibilities. So your mom was on hospice care for about 7 months, and you share in your book that you found joy in your caregiving experience. Where did you find that? What made you feel joyful?
Well, overall, our relationship changed. It shifted. And as time went on, I felt as if I got to know my mother better. I mean, my husband had said, this is an opportunity. Do what you can to, get to know your mother, because she's not going to be with us forever. And it was such an incredible experience that we lived through together with my mom and I. She went through a lot of, well, I didn't really know what was going on, but she had visitors who came and saw her.
Visitors that you could not see?
Could I not see? I called them her invisible people.
Oh.
And when she first had these invisible people come and see her, she was terrified because she thought that nothing came after life. She was afraid of death. And so she would hide under the covers. And I would come in her room and she'd tell me, there are all these people in here. And it was like, no, there's nobody. I can't see anybody.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so we had some really interesting conversations. And then as time went on, she got used to these people because they were not threatening at all, of course. And she'd sort of have tea parties for them. So, it was she was really enjoying this aspect of being at the end of life, which I've found out later that it's called visioning.
Yeah,
and
deathbed visioning.
Yeah. And I didn't know at the time, so I was madly looking in books at the library to try and figure out what was going on.
Wow.
This was back in 2006. So it's been a long road in seeing joy out there into the public.
Yeah.
Because when I first wanted to publish the book, which was like in 2008, I had a literary agent, and she submitted it to her, favorite editors at the big houses. And they all said, well, this is well written, but we just don't want to touch death. It's just something that we have decided is not commercial. And so we're not interested.
Although it is a topic that every single person who picks up a book needs to know about.
Exactly.
Death and
Exactly.
dying, right? Because it
And
comes to
they would
everybody.
admit that we need this, but it doesn't sell, so we're not going to do it.
Yeah. Let's face it, death isn't sexy, right? It's that's the absolute truth. Well, so your mother did not have any sort of belief in an afterlife.
None.
So as she had the deathbed visions and she interacted with the people that she could see, did her perception or her beliefs about whatever might come after death change?
Well, that's a good question. I'd never asked her exactly what you just said. But I think that that's probably true. For a while, she understood what was going on. She understood somehow. She was smart, and she understood that they were there for her, and that they were getting ready to help her move out of this life. And so one time, like maybe the 5th or 6th month, I said to her, "Well, you haven't had any visitors recently." And she said, "Well, they still come, but I don't want to talk to them." So it was like she still was afraid of what would happen afterwards.
Mm-hmm. She had some fear.
But at the very end, she got over that, and it was her beloved grandmother and my father who were there.
People that she knew.
People she knew who were the most sacred to her. Yeah.
So did your mother interact with the hospice chaplain at all?
The hospice chaplain came, and which was wonderful. I wasn't there specifically that day, so I don't know exactly how that went, but she was grateful for it. And I think, as I remember afterwards, she said that the chaplain had read her some poetry by Mary Oliver, who's a Cape Cod poet.
Mm-hmm.
And she found that very, very rewarding. And she had never been especially religious, but I think it was comforting to her to have the chaplain come.
That's nice. See, and the reason I wanted to focus on that is because so many people have a perception of the chaplain that's inaccurate, that the chaplain's there to, pray, or it's all about religion and getting to heaven and sin and, that sort of thing, converting, saving. And of course, that's not true. Chaplaincy is interfaith. It's for people who are atheists and agnostics and humanists and even Wiccan, all the different belief systems or none. It's totally about where the patient is in their belief system. So I'm so glad that the chaplain found something that would connect with your mom. That's
Yes,
so cool.
Absolutely. It was wonderful. And I had no idea, as you said, I had no idea what the chaplain was going to be doing with my mom.
Yeah.
And it worked out really well. I think it was
Nice.
very reassuring to her.
Okay, so 7 months or so on hospice care. Tell me about your interactions with the hospice team and how that experience moved for you.
The hospice team was wonderful. We had an absolutely fabulous health aide who just knew when she came into the room, my mother's face would brighten, and she just made my mother so happy. And we had a great nurse who is deceased now, but she was lovely too. And while I was taking care of my mom, I was also running a bed and breakfast, which I didn't mention. And so Jane, who was our doctor, she said, this is really a lot for you. So we're going to get you somebody on the weekends too. So we had a lovely young woman named Allison Wonderland who came in. And she had taken that name Wonderland. It wasn't her real name, but that's what she changed her name to. And she was a delight. And it was as if she had a fairy wand and she went around the room and sprinkled fairy dust all over. So, we were very fortunate, really. And I had no idea, in the beginning, I had no idea about hospice. I thought that you had to have cancer to have hospice. That was one thing that I was, incorrect about. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I thought that when you get hospice, it would be, I had asked the doctor, Dr. Jane, Nurse Jane rather, I had asked her, how long we should expect my mom to last with us. And she said most patients, it's a month, a little bit longer. And so this was a big surprise that she was with us for 7 more months. We didn't know that would be the case.
Yeah, you expected it to be quicker.
We did. And, we learned as we went along, basically.
That's the thing about caregiving at end of life is for so many people, it is on-the-job training, which is crazy because when you consider the value of what you're doing and this person that you care about, taking care of them. But so many caregivers come to this experience with absolutely no resource, no education. They're just plunged into it. I think it's also valuable to acknowledge that you were running a business and working at the same time. A lot of caregivers find themselves working a full-time job and then managing a full-time caregiving job that they don't get paid for after their work hours.
I know. And then there are a lot of people who are in the sandwich generation. And that I could not imagine having small children and taking care of my mom at the same time. That would have just been too much.
Yeah.
Because one of the hardest parts for me was the loss of sleep towards the end, where my mom would, she'd be awake for like 48 hours or more, and then she'd sleep for 3 days solid. I'd wake her up from time to time and give her some water or change her brief. But it was very hard because she'd also call out in the night when I was asleep, and I'd have to go in and see what the problem was. So for me, I think one of the most difficult things was the sleep deprivation.
Were you the only caregiver at that point, Alexandra?
I was the only caregiver. I mean, my husband was there, but he was we had a little cottage on her property, and so he would sleep out there because he liked all the windows wide open. And so I was the only one in the house who would hear her if she called me. So I would always go in whenever she called me in the middle of the night.
So were you your mom's decision maker as well towards the end of her life when she couldn't make decisions for herself?
Oh, she was still making decisions.
I like your mom. She sounds like such a firecracker. I love it. Well, let me ask you this. Were there ever times that you disagreed with your mother's decisions and wanted her to receive a different type of care or do something different?
I don't think so.
You guys were pretty in sync.
Yeah, pretty in sync. And then towards the end, she would take advice from me if there was any, question that needed to be answered. One time we took her to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston because she had she had a drawer full of memories of her life that we'd look at from time to time. And I noticed that she had a lot of postcards that she had collected over the years of the Buddhist statues. So there's a whole floor in the Fine Arts Museum that has that. So we were able to borrow somebody's wheelchair and take her in the wheelchair. And she was just so happy. And I think that was the last time we really took her out into the world. I know towards the end in the summer, I would take her out with the wheelchair into the garden. And she loved being in the garden and seeing the green leaves and the birds fluttering around. It was, nature is really important, even when especially when you're bedbound, to be able to get out and experience nature is wonderful. It's really important.
Absolutely. Alexandra's not finished telling her story. Stay with us after the break to hear the lessons she learned from her caregiving experience.
What if aging at home didn't have to mean being alone? At Halo Care, we're redefining what at-home care can be, combining cutting-edge technology with real human compassion. Our 24/7 Care Hub team is always there, offering peace of mind for families, caregivers, and seniors alike. With Halo Care, safety at home comes first. Through smart home technology, wellness monitoring, and personal connection that helps people live independently and confidently. Whether you're a family caregiver, a healthcare professional, or someone looking for extra support to stay at home, Halo Care is here to help. Visit halocaregroup.com/USA or check the show notes for our link. or call 888-247-7102 to learn how Halo Care can make home the safest place to be, because care should always feel personal, human, and connected. This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services.
If you or someone you care about is dealing with a life-limiting illness, you need a guide. Hospice Navigation Services is here to help you get the best end-of-life care possible. We understand the importance of personalized, experienced support. Hospice navigators provide one-on-one support over the phone or through video calls to guide you every step of the way. They'll answer your questions, explain what hospice care looks like, and give you the tools to feel confident in your decisions. Whether you're planning ahead or you have an urgent need, Hospice Navigation Services helps you and your family understand your options for end-of-life care. A hospice navigation session is a great way to troubleshoot your current hospice care and get answers to your questions. You don't have to go through this alone. You deserve compassionate support and guidance for your end-of-life experience. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. To book your hospice navigation session and receive your free guide to end-of-life care, visit our website at hospicenavigation.com. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. So you had a really positive experience with hospice care. Was there anything that went wrong? Were there any missteps or anything you would want to have changed about the hospice care and how it went?
I don't think so. I was just so immensely grateful to have them there and to know that I could call at any time if I had a question. When my mom started having these invisible people, I called her GP because I had no idea what was going on. And he wanted to give her, he called them hallucinations. And he wanted to give her some sort of medicine so that this would pass, like an antipsychotic. And I just felt that was the wrong thing for her. So, I didn't even ask her. I just made the decision, no, we're just going to go with totally natural.
Right.
And I think that was the right decision, because I remember seeing in the rehab center she was at, and they had, I saw the helpers with trays of pills. And I think that what they were doing was, controlling some of these quote unquote hallucinations. And so my mom was able to, because she was at home, she was able to live all of that, which was really wonderful, because I think it meant a lot to her at the end of her life.
Well, way back when, years ago, that was something that facilities did quite a bit. And what we've learned now is deathbed visioning for a lot of people is not something that's anxiety inducing. It's not anything that causes fear or agitation for a lot of people. And it's actually a very normal, natural part of transitioning up to and through the dying process. It's very normal. And so we don't medicate for that. Why medicate something that if she sees her grandmother or her father and it gives her joy? And there are a lot of people that believe that this is a transition point, moving from this space to whatever comes after. And the spirit and the mind are open to those things while the body is doing the labor of shutting itself down.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so why medicate for that if you don't need to?
Totally. I agree with you. And she, at one point I came into her room and I was, in a rush because I was doing something for the bed and breakfast at the same time. And I started to break into her. She was having a conversation with someone. And so I started to break in, and then I realized I better not. And she said to me, "I see joy." And that was where the title for the book came from. So that was just a really, really beautiful moment of the whole experience, that she was seeing joy.
Did she know anybody named Joy, or she was just saying, I see the joy in what's happening?
Exactly. It wasn't, it's all in the book, so your listeners can read it in the book. But it was very specific that she was seeing joy and how happy she was, and it was really wonderful.
That's pretty amazing. That is pretty amazing. So a lot of people are fearful of hospice, right? because we know it is about death and dying, but hospice is also about living and thriving and quality of life. So what would you tell a family member like you, a child of a parent who's ill? What would you tell them if they were hesitant to consider hospice?
I tell them not to, that it's a fabulous experience. It's hard to believe that anyone would hesitate. It was so rewarding for me. I'm so glad that I did that. That was, right up there in my lifetime, like with the birth of my children. I consider it a similar experience.
Yeah, it is life-changing
Yeah,
to care for someone
absolutely.
as they're dying. So if you can have hospice support. But it sounds also like, Alexandra, that you were a huge advocate for your mom. And we never want to undersell the caregiver role, because hospice does a lot of great things, right, that a caregiver can't do. But the caregiver is the expert. You were the expert in your mom, in who
Well,
she was.
I was responsible for her when I decided to move back. For a long time, I had wanted to move back from Europe, and this was I saw it as an opportunity because I wasn't totally satisfied with the situation where my parents were both at the end of their lives, and I wanted to spend more time with them as well. And so I was fortunate that it worked out. And when my dad was still alive, my mom and my dad were living in their house, in the main house, and there was a cottage on the property. So my husband and I moved into the cottage. And then when my dad passed away in '99, my mom said, "Well, would you move into the house because I don't like being alone?" And so that was the beginning of the mending, shall we say, of any problems in the relationship over the years. Yeah, she wasn't really the easiest person to have as a mother, I have to say, because at one point when I went to Europe to live in Europe, her therapist said to her that perhaps I had gone to put an ocean between us. So she repeated that to me. And
Ouch.
it's like, no, I fell in love. I went to live in Europe. Paris is a beautiful place to live.
But this was
So,
in your mother's mind.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that you had intentionally created the distance.
exactly.
Was your dad on hospice care?
My dad had a stroke, so he wasn't on hospice care. He had visiting nurses who came in and, controlling his blood pressure, I think. Was it his blood pressure? Something to do with the blood. And so he had regular blood tests, and they came and they gave him baths and so forth. So I didn't have to do that. But I did do that for my mom in the beginning before she was bedbound, which is very different from, a child. When you put a child in the bath and then the water gets too hot, the child says, "It's too hot." But my mom didn't. So one time I can remember going in there and she was just enjoying the heat. And then I realized I need to put some more cold in.
Oh, my goodness. Caregivers worry about that, right? All those little bitty things. It is in a great way a lot like caring for a child in some aspects. I don't want to equate the two because we never want to infantilize a grown adult. But there are a lot of those tasks, the caregiving tasks for bathing and hygiene and sleep and things like that, feeding, that are very similar to having a child. And I think the workload can be overwhelming for a caregiver. Did you ever have a time that you felt overwhelmed, or was it always a rewarding thing for you?
I can remember one specific time where I did feel very overwhelmed, and I had gotten to know Lisa, our health aide, quite well, from seeing her every day practically. And so she took one look at me and she said, "You need to get out of here." And I said, "Yeah, I do."
Don't you love having a hospice person that looks at you and says, "I can tell you need a break"? That's awesome.
Absolutely. So, my husband and I got in the car and we drove down to Provincetown, which is an absolutely beautiful place. And we, walked through town, and the rhythm of this was, I guess it must have been like in September. So there weren't as many tourists, but there was still a lively life going on. And while we were there, we went into a shop where we could buy flower bulbs. And so we bought flower bulbs, and took them back and planted them out the window where my mother could look out. I could imagine her looking out and seeing the flower bulbs that we'd planted in her memory.
Very nice. Very nice. So you have written about your mom, and she knew her mind. She was a vocal person, knew what she wanted, and she knew what she wanted out of her life. And you really tried to respect that as a caregiver. You and I talked about that in an earlier call, and in your book you write about that. What are some of the practical ways that you would recommend for caregivers to talk with their parents about wishes and boundaries?
Well, that's another sort of hard question because I think it's really good if people can talk to their parents before they get to the stage that my parents were in, because my parents were really elderly.
Yeah.
And so there needs to be some sort of preparation ahead of time because you have to pick the right moment. It's not always the right moment for this type of discussion. And you have to lead into it and be careful what you say. And what I did with my mom is that I tried to continue the things that she enjoyed. Like she had always loved, what's it called? Upstairs, Downstairs? I think that's what it was. It was a television series.
Yeah.
And so we went to the library and got copies of reruns. And so she would watch the reruns and she really enjoyed that. And I think for some people it would be music. We also got her, we had, I guess you call it a boombox, a radio.
Yeah.
And so I got her a CD of Frank Sinatra. And she really loved listening to Frank Sinatra. And then my daughter brought her the Italian singer whose name I can never remember, who has the wonderful voice, Pavarotti or something?
Pavarotti. Mm-hmm.
Pavarotti, yes. And so that was really special for her. And I think now, today, what people could do probably is audiobooks, which didn't exist as much when my mom was at the end of her life.
Yeah. Was she a reader? Was your mom a reader?
She was a reader. She was definitely a reader. And so that would be, really something that you could bring into the life of someone who was in a situation like my mom was.
So did you have a lot of those conversations in advance, or did you and your mother just find yourself in this caregiving situation?
We found ourselves in this caregiving situation.
Yeah. I think this is very common. So what I hear you telling me is that you looked for all the things that you knew that your mother loved based on how she had lived her life. Music, the bulbs outside, the garden, things like that. You looked for things that were really spoke to who she was before she became ill, before she got into those later years.
And another thing that she really enjoyed was looking at photographs from the past as well. So we did that as well. That's another good option for caregivers.
Did she like to sit and reminisce and share memories about things like that over the photographs?
Yes.
Yeah, that's legacy. That's sort of a legacy project of sorts. So a lot of times hospice folks will do a legacy project like writing letters or making videos for the people who are left once a death has happened, and sitting and reminiscing over photographs and sharing the stories that a lot of times. Did your mother ever tell you a story about a photograph that you had never heard before?
Well, I can't remember a specific instance, but I'm sure she did. I found out a lot about her life that way, because she had a very long life. And when I was a child, she didn't talk to me that much about it because my father's background was so unusual. So she'd tend to talk about my father because his father was close to the Tsar of Russia. And so they had a really unusual situation where they escaped from Russia. So she talked about that a lot. But not so much about her own family. So I discovered all kinds of things that I had never known. She had a brother who had schizophrenia, and I had never met that brother. She was from a big family. And so I talked to her about that. She'd had an abortion. I talked to her about the abortion that she'd never shared with me. She had told my daughters about it. For what reason, I don't know, but she'd never told me. And so there was opportunities that would creep up. And when you're a caregiver, you sort of have to know to take advantage of those opportunities. because you can't always bring it up yourself. You have to wait for the right moment.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think picking your moment to have conversations. And there are those vulnerable moments that you have when you're looking through keepsakes, looking through photographs. And obviously your mom felt like she wanted you to know more about who she was, and she wanted to share that. It's her legacy. I think that's wonderful. Storytelling is really powerful, and sometimes it gets left at the side of the road when we're caregiving, because there's sheet changing and incontinent care and meals that have to be cooked and meds that have to be given. And, a lot of the practical mechanics of day-to-day caregiving. And I think the legacy stuff and the storytelling gets left behind.
That was really part of what was so rewarding as well, is to speak to her honestly about, her life. And it was really meaningful to me that I was able to share that with her.
I absolutely love it that you had such a meaningful experience with your mom like that. That's pretty amazing.
I wish everyone would have that type of experience. I'm as I said, I'm really grateful to the hospice folks who helped us, because that was, if there was ever anything I didn't know, I could immediately call them up and ask a question. It was very useful.
Yeah, you have that secret weapon in your pocket, that resource. So
That's right.
Tell listeners where they can find your book, Seeing Joy, A Story of Life, Death, and What Comes Next.
Well, it's available online from all of the online bookshops. You can also request your bookstore order it, or also from Kohler Books. That may be the easiest way. Kohler Books published Seeing Joy, and there's a link, I think, on their website.
I'll put a link in the show notes so listeners can go straight in and find it. And so one last thing, the cover of the book, the cover art is an illustration with these stars around it, but it's a female, it's a woman. There's something special about that. Tell my listeners about the cover of the book.
Well, the cover of the book is actually a painting, a portrait that was done of my mom when she was 25. And, some people, before they've read the book, they say, well, why put that woman on the cover of the book? Who's that woman? And it's my mother.
Yeah.
And so she had the painting in her room, and she was 25, and the author, actually the painting was never totally finished, because the author, my mom was apparently quite a lovely young lady, and the author, the artist became a little bit too, she called it pausy.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
So when he passed away, somebody told her that his widow was selling his art, and she went and bought it for $50.
That's so cool. And all these years later,
It's on the cover of Seeing Joy.
I love it. Do you think your mom would like that? Would she like knowing that the painting's there?
I think she would be delighted by that. She, at one point, when I was taking notes about what she was saying, she asked me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, maybe I'm going to write a book about you." And that really, her eyes lit up, and she started using all these complicated words.
She wanted to sound really smart in the
She wanted
book.
to sound really smart. She always beat me at Scrabble. She was amazing that way. And so I said, "Well, that doesn't sound like what you usually." She said, "Well, we have to use big words in this book you're writing about me."
She wanted it to sound as if she was very educated and cerebral. I love it. I love it. Alexandra, thank you for sharing your mom with us today. Thank you for sharing your caregiving story. I love it that you had such a good experience. We know that caregiving is hard, and, there are a lot of things that aren't great about it. But the fact that you were so respectful and so loving of your mom in the last few months of her life, it's just a beautiful story. Thank you for telling it today.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Heart of Hospice podcast. Check out our sponsor in the show notes and please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We would appreciate it if you would share this episode with your friends and family and anyone who needs to know more about hospice. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.